I broke up with him, and he started dating my mom. I never thought breaking up with someone could lead to something so disturbing. When I ended things with Jake, I assumed it would be the typical post-breakup awkwardness. Maybe a few bitter texts, some mutual unfollowing on social media, and then life would go on. I was wrong. It all started 2 weeks after I broke up with him. I had been with Jake for almost a year, but the relationship had become exhausting. He was charming, sure, but also selfish, immature, and just not the right person for me. So I broke it off. He didn't take it well, but I figured he'd move on eventually. What I didn't expect was for him to move on to my mother. The first time I noticed something was off was when my mom, who had never shown any interest in my dating life before, suddenly started asking me about Jake. "So, how's Jake doing?" she asked casually while stirring her coffee one morning. I frowned. Uh, I don't know, Mom. We're not together anymore, remember?" "Oh, right. It's just, he messaged me the other day. He was asking if I was doing okay since you and he broke up." I nearly dropped my spoon. "Wait, what? Why would he even message you?" Mom shrugged, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. I should have paid more attention to that moment. A few days later, I walked into the kitchen to grab a snack and nearly choked when I saw Jake sitting at the table, chatting with my mom like they were old friends. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, staring at them. Jake grinned at me, completely unfazed. "Hey, Soph, your mom invited me over for lunch." I turned to my mother, expecting her to look guilty or at least sheepish. Instead, she gave me a breezy smile. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. We were just talking." It was weird, but it got worse. A week later, I came home from a study session to find Jake and my mom sitting together on the couch, holding hands. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just some friendly catch-up. This was something else. Something twisted. I stood frozen in the doorway, blinking in disbelief. My mom and Jake were sitting side by side, a little too close for comfort. They were laughing about something. Probably some inside joke. But all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. "What is this?" I managed to choke out. Jake looked up, his grin widening. "Oh, hey, Soph. Didn't see you there." He casually pulled his hand away from my mom's, but the damage had already been done. Mom's smile was tight, and there was an awkward silence before she spoke. "Honey, you're overreacting. Jake and I have just been talking, that's all. He's been so sweet checking up on me after the breakup." I felt a mix of anger and betrayal surge through me. "Checking up on you? Are you serious right now?" "Mom, you know we just broke up, right? This is not normal." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Soph, it's not what you think. Jake and I are just—" She paused, looking at Jake for reassurance. "We're just friends." But the way they exchanged glances told a completely different story. I couldn't believe it. I had ended things with Jake because he was too clingy, immature, and honestly a bit of a loser. And now here he was, sitting in my house, holding hands with my mom like they were a couple. "I need to go," I said sharply, turning around and walking out the door before I completely lost it. I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing around my room, trying to make sense of what had happened. I texted my best friend, Jenna, hoping she would have some wisdom to offer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't just strange. It was wrong. When I got home later that night, Jake was still there, sitting at the kitchen table with my mom, sharing some wine. It was like they'd been best friends for years. They were laughing, talking about our favorite TV shows as if I wasn't even there. I cleared my throat. "Jake, could we talk?" Jake shrugged casually and stood up. "Sure, I guess." He followed me to the hallway, and I could hear my mom's voice in the background. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded once we were out of earshot. "Why are you hanging out with my mom?" Jake looked down at the floor for a second, clearly uncomfortable. But then he raised his head and smirked. "Honestly, she's a lot easier to talk to than you. She listens to me, Soph. I was just trying to help her out. Plus, your mom is pretty cool." My heart sank. "What are you saying?" Are you dating her? Jake's smirk faltered for a second, but then he shrugged again, as if this whole thing didn't matter. Maybe. Why does it matter? You dumped me, remember? Yeah. And that's why you're dating my mom? As some kind of revenge? Jake raised an eyebrow. If you want to call it that, sure. But we've been getting along, and we're just two people who enjoy each other's company. Nothing more to it than that. I felt my stomach twist. You're seriously trying to tell me this is normal? That you're dating the person who gave birth to me? Hey, you broke up with me, Jake repeated, his voice getting colder. You don't get to tell me who I can or can't date now. And your mom, well, she's been a lot more supportive than you were. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought we had been close, my mom and me. But she was now dating the one person who had made my life miserable for months. Fine, I said, my voice shaking with anger. If you want to be with my mom, go ahead, but don't expect me to ever be okay with it. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there, the grin on his face slowly fading. The days after my confrontation with Jake were a blur. I tried to focus on school, on anything other than the twisted reality that was unfolding in my own home. But it was impossible to escape it. Everywhere I turned, there was some reminder of what had become my nightmare. Jake's shoes by the door, his stupid laugh echoing through the kitchen, and worst of all, my mom acting like everything was normal. It was like I didn't even exist anymore. The next week, I came home to find Jake and my mom sitting on the couch watching a movie together. The sight made my blood run cold. Jake was sprawled out on one side of the couch, a blanket wrapped around him, while my mom rested her head on his shoulder. I wanted to scream, but I just stood there in the doorway, frozen, unable to believe what I was seeing. Hey, Soph, Jake called out cheerfully, his voice dripping with false warmth. We're watching the new season of The Crown. You should join us. I didn't even look at him. I couldn't. Mom, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. What is going on here? She didn't immediately respond. She just sat there looking at the screen, almost as if I wasn't even there. But then she turned to me, her face soft but distant. Sophia, she began, her tone different from usual, almost defensive. I've told you, Jake and I are just spending time together. I thought you'd be happy for me. I felt the sting of her words like a slap to the face. Happy for you? Was she really asking me that? I'd just broken up with him a few weeks ago, and now here she was, acting like I should be fine with this bizarre situation. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't normal. You're dating my ex. This is so messed up, I can't even begin to explain it. She gave me a sad smile, the kind that always made me feel like I was overreacting. You need to understand, honey, that people can connect in unexpected ways. I know it seems strange to you, but Jake and I have a lot in common. We've talked about a lot of things you wouldn't understand. Really? I snapped. You think I wouldn't understand? You're dating the guy I just broke up with. And you expect me to support this? Jake interjected from the couch, his voice smooth but with an edge of mockery. Soph, come on. It's not that big of a deal. It's not like we're officially a couple yet. That's when I lost it. Not officially? What does that even mean? You're practically living here. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. This is too much drama, Sophia. We're not doing anything wrong. Just relax, okay? I stormed out of the room before I could say anything more, my mind swirling with confusion and anger. The one person I had always turned to for support, the one person I had trusted, was now making excuses for my ex. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my thoughts racing. How could she do this? How could she choose him over me? Was I really being unreasonable, or was this whole situation just as messed up as it felt? I tried to think about it from her perspective. She had always been a little lonely. She'd been a single mom for as long as I could remember. But dating Jake? That was beyond anything I could understand. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I needed space away from both of them. The next morning, I packed a bag, grabbed my phone, and left a note for my mom. I'm staying at Jenna's for a while. I can't do this right now. It felt good to get away. Jenna's house was a refuge, a place where I didn't have to deal with the daily reminder of my mom's new relationship with my ex. The first night I stayed at her place, I felt like I could finally breathe again, free from the suffocating tension of my own home. Jenna didn't need an explanation. She knew something was up from the moment I walked through the door, looking like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. "So, Jake and your mom?" she asked cautiously, her eyes wide. I nodded, sitting down at the kitchen table. "I don't even know how it happened. One minute I'm breaking up with him, and the next, they're together." Jenna's eyebrows shot up. "Are you serious? Your mom and Jake? That's beyond weird. I mean, I get that she's lonely, but him? After everything he put you through?" "I don't know, Jen. She says she's happy, and I don't want to be the one to ruin it, but I can't just pretend it's normal." I ran my fingers through my hair in frustration. "I feel like I'm losing my mind. And worse, losing her." Jenna leaned back in her chair, biting her lip thoughtfully. "Have you talked to her about it?" I shook my head. "Every time I try, she brushes me off. It's like she thinks I'm overreacting. She says I don't understand, but how could I ever understand this?" "You need to talk to her. Really talk to her," Jenna said, her voice firm. "Not just complain about Jake, but about how you're feeling. Because this is affecting you too, not just her." I nodded reluctantly. I knew she was right. I couldn't just run away from it. But how could I possibly have that conversation without losing my mind completely? The next day, after a sleepless night of tossing and turning, I made the decision. I was going to talk to my mom. I had to. When I returned home later that afternoon, I could feel the familiar tension in the air. Jake's car was parked outside, and I could hear their voices drifting from the living room. I hesitated in the doorway, wondering if I was making a huge mistake. But then I pushed the door open. Mom and Jake were sitting on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn and watching some silly rom-com. They didn't notice me at first, but then Jake looked up and flashed a grin. "Hey, Soph, you miss me?" I ignored him, walking straight to my mom. "Mom, can we talk?" Her face softened slightly, but I saw the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Soph, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "I'm not trying to make things difficult," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "I just want to understand. Why him? Why Jake?" Mom's expression hardened, and she set the popcorn down. "Jake has been a good friend to me, Soph. I know you think this is strange, but I'm not asking you to like it. I'm just asking for you to accept it." "You want me to accept this?" My voice cracked, and I could feel tears threatening to spill. "How can I? He was my boyfriend. You're dating my ex, Mom. That's weird." She sighed, looking exhausted. "I don't need you to approve of my choices, Soph. I'm doing what feels right for me. You need to understand that." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I can't just accept this. I feel like you've chosen him over me. Like I'm just some side character in your life now. I don't even recognize you anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and thick with the unspoken pain we were both feeling. My mom's face softened, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her calm exterior. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sweetheart," she said quietly. "I never meant for you to feel left behind, but you need to understand that I have needs too. I've spent so many years taking care of you, and I think I deserve a little happiness, don't you?" The silence stretched between us, and I realized how much I had been holding back, how much I had buried to keep the peace. "Of course you do, Mom," I whispered, my voice raw. "But not at the cost of our relationship. Not like this." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then finally, she spoke. "I never wanted to hurt you, Soph, but I can't change what's happening. I wish I could, but this is how it is right now." I swallowed hard, tears blurring my vision. "I just don't know how to be okay with this." Mom reached out and placed a hand on mine. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the first real connection we had shared in weeks. I'll give you time. I won't push you to accept it. But please understand that I care about you too. I don't want to lose you. I nodded slowly, unsure of what the future held, but knowing this was a step. A small step. But it was something. Jake didn't speak a word as he got up to leave. He didn't need to. His presence in my home had already said everything. As he left, I turned back to my mom, the weight of everything still heavy on my shoulders. But in that moment, we were both trying to figure out how to fix something broken, even if we didn't have all the answers. The next few days were awkward. My mom and I didn't have any grand heart-to-heart moments, but there was a subtle shift. She tried harder in small ways. She made my favorite dinner one night, even though I knew she was busy. She left me a note on my bed saying she loved me, something she hadn't done in a long time. It was clear she was trying to repair the rift, but it wasn't enough to erase the tension between us. And then there was Jake. Despite my efforts to avoid him, he was still popping up in my life. Calling my mom, texting her, coming over at least 3 times a week. Every time I walked into the house, there he was, sitting at the kitchen table or lounging on the couch like he belonged there. The sight made my stomach turn. I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just dating my mom. He was taking my place. I avoided him as much as I could, but it was impossible to avoid him completely. I had to face him sooner or later, and that day came sooner than I wanted. I walked into the living room to grab my book, and there he was, sitting there, flipping through the TV channels. "Hey, Soph," Jake said, looking up at me. His voice was too casual, like everything was fine. I didn't respond. I grabbed the book and tried to walk out of the room, but he caught me off guard when he spoke again. "Are you going to keep avoiding me like this?" he asked. I froze. "I'm not avoiding you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just don't want to have anything to do with you." He didn't seem offended. Instead, he gave me one of those smug, too confident smiles. "Well, I'm not going anywhere, so you might as well get used to it." I wanted to punch him in the arm or say something that would make him leave. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and forced myself to look him in the eye. "You're messing with my life, Jake. This isn't some game. This is my mom we're talking about. You don't get to just waltz in here like you own the place." Jake's smile faltered for a second, but it quickly returned. "I'm not trying to mess with your life. We're just 2 people who get along, Soph. I don't know why this is such a big deal to you." I shook my head, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. "Because it is a big deal. You're my ex. You don't just get to date my mom and act like it's normal. It's not normal." Jake sighed and stood up, crossing the room toward me. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I didn't ask for this, okay? But I'm not going to back off just because you don't like it." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to tell him to leave, to get out of my life for good. But a part of me knew I couldn't control everything, and that scared me. "You don't get to tell me how I should feel," I snapped. "This is my family, my life. And you're just here." Jake didn't respond immediately. He just stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out of the room. I stood there, my pulse racing. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument I'd had with him before. That night, I sat down with my mom after dinner. We had been avoiding the conversation for days, but it was time to face it. "Mom, we need to talk," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. She put down her fork, looking at me with a mixture of guilt and uncertainty. "I know, Soph. I've been waiting for you to bring it up." I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to argue, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. "This isn't okay. You and Jake, it's just not right." She looked down at her plate, her eyes filled with regret. "I never meant for you to feel this way. I'm sorry. I should have talked to you about it before it got this far." "You should have," I said, my voice trembling. "This whole thing is tearing us apart. I feel like you don't care about me anymore. Like I'm just in the way. My mom reached across the table and took my hand. That's not true, Soph. I love you. I always will. But I need you to understand that I have a right to live my own life too. I get that, I said, tears welling up. But not like this. Not with him. She sighed. I don't know what to tell you. I really care about Jake. And I think he cares about me too. But I can't make you okay with it. I just need you to give it time. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I don't know if I can, Mom. I don't know if I can ever be okay with it. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Please, honey, don't give up on me. Don't give up on us. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. The words just wouldn't come. I left the room and went upstairs, shutting the door behind me. As I lay on my bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized that nothing would ever be the same. I didn't know what the future held for me or for my mom and Jake, but I knew one thing for sure. I was caught in the middle of something that would change everything forever. The days that followed felt like a slow-motion train wreck. Everything I had once known seemed to be shifting under my feet, and I wasn't sure how to find solid ground anymore. Jake was always around, constantly texting my mom, showing up at the house, hanging out with her in the living room like they were already a couple. But to me, it felt like an invasion of my life. I wasn't ready to accept what was happening. I had barely spoken to my mom since that conversation. Every time I tried, the words got stuck in my throat. How could I possibly be okay with something so wrong? I spent most of the week at Jenna's, only coming home for food or to sleep. I needed space. It wasn't until Friday night that I realized I couldn't keep running away from my mom or this situation. I had to face it. That evening, I returned home and found Jake's car parked out front. I tried to ignore the surge of anger in my chest and walked inside. Hey, Soph, Jake called from the living room as if everything was normal. I didn't respond, walking straight past him without even making eye contact. But he didn't let it go. Look, we need to talk, he said, standing up and following me down the hallway. I get that you're upset, but avoiding me isn't going to make things better. I spun around to face him, my patience worn thin. No, Jake, you don't get it. You're dating my mom. My mom. You don't belong here. Jake's face darkened, his smile fading. Soph, I'm not trying to replace you or anything. I don't know why you're making this such a big deal. Because it is a big deal, I shouted, my voice breaking. You were my boyfriend, and now you're with my mom. It's weird. It's messed up. And I can't just pretend it's okay. Jake stood there for a moment, looking at me with an expression that was both frustrated and almost pitying. You need to grow up, Soph. People move on. You're not a kid anymore. I wanted to scream at him, tell him how much he had hurt me and my mom, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I turned around and walked into the kitchen, needing space to breathe. Jake stood in the doorway, still talking. Soph, I'm not doing anything wrong. Your mom and I, we have something real. It's not just about you, you know? It's about her too. I felt my heart break all over again. You don't get to talk about her like that, I said quietly, my voice shaking. She's my mom, and I'm the one who has to deal with this mess. Jake didn't reply, but I could feel his eyes on me as I walked out of the kitchen and upstairs. I slammed my bedroom door behind me, locking it, and collapsed onto my bed. The weight of everything crushed down on me. That night, something unexpected happened. My mom came into my room, knocking gently on the door. I didn't answer at first. Part of me didn't want to face her. I was angry, hurt, and confused, and I didn't know how to talk about it without losing control. But she didn't give up. Sophia, please, she said softly from the other side of the door. I need to talk to you. Can I come in? I sat up in bed and took a deep breath, then unlocked the door. My mom stepped in slowly, closing it gently behind her. I'm sorry, she began, sitting down on the edge of my bed. I know this has been hard for you, But I need you to understand that it's not easy for me either. I looked away, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. Then why are you doing it, Mom? Why are you with him? She sighed, her fingers brushing her hair back. Because I'm lonely, Soph. I've been alone for so long, and Jake, he makes me feel seen. He makes me feel like I'm more than just your mom. I know it's complicated, but I didn't expect you to react like this. I turned back to face her, my anger bubbling up again. What do you want me to say? That it's fine? That I'm just supposed to be okay with you and Jake? Because I'm not. I can't be. My mom looked at me with such sadness in her eyes that I felt a pang of guilt. I never wanted to hurt you, Soph. I didn't think it would be this difficult, but I need you to trust me. I'm not abandoning you, okay? I'm still your mom. I always will be. Then why does it feel like you're choosing him over me? I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She didn't answer right away, and for a long moment we both just sat in silence, the tension between us thick. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not choosing him over you, I promise. But I do need you to give me space to figure this out. I don't expect you to approve, but I do need you to try. I wiped my eyes, frustrated with myself for letting the tears fall. I don't know how to do that, Mom. I don't know if I ever can. She placed a hand gently on mine. It'll take time, but we'll get through it. Together. I nodded slowly, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I wasn't ready to accept Jake in my life, let alone in my mom's. But maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to understand it. Or at least try. The days after that conversation were still filled with tension, but something had shifted. Just a little. My mom and I weren't exactly back to normal, but we were trying. There were no more awkward silences at dinner, and she made an effort to check in with me every night, even if it was just to ask how my day went. I could tell she was making an effort to reassure me that she hadn't forgotten about me. But Jake? He was still a constant presence. I could hear his laughter in the living room some nights, their voices blending together in an almost pleasant way. He'd stay for dinner sometimes, and my mom would act like everything was fine, like nothing had changed. But I couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. I hated how everything felt so off. One evening, after a long day of school and feeling completely drained, I came home to the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was Jake's. I froze for a moment, my stomach tightening. I didn't want to deal with him today. Not today. I walked inside and immediately headed upstairs, hoping to avoid both him and my mom. But as I reached the top of the stairs, my mom's voice echoed up to me. Sophia, can we talk for a second? I groaned inwardly, but turned back around and walked down the stairs. My mom was standing in the hallway, her expression serious but soft. Jake was sitting on the couch watching TV, looking like he hadn't noticed me yet. Can you give us a moment? My mom asked Jake. He raised an eyebrow but didn't protest. Sure, I'll be in the kitchen if you need me. I watched as he stood up and walked out of the room. The moment he was gone, I turned to face my mom. Can we just not do this tonight, Mom? I said, the frustration evident in my voice. I'm really not in the mood. My mom sighed, her face showing concern. I know this is hard for you, Soph, and I can't imagine what you're feeling, but I really want to talk to you. About Jake. About us. I crossed my arms tightly across my chest, my emotions running wild. I don't want to talk about him anymore. I just want things to go back to how they were. Things won't go back to the way they were, sweetheart, my mom said gently. And I'm not asking you to pretend like everything's okay. But I need you to see this from my perspective. I can't keep living for everyone else, trying to make everyone happy. I need to be happy too. I clenched my jaw, trying to control the emotions threatening to spill out. I get that you want to be happy, but it feels like you're just replacing me. Like I'm not enough for you anymore. I don't know how to be okay with this, Mom. Her eyes softened as she took a step closer to me. You are enough for me, Soph. You'll always be my daughter, and I love you. But I can't live my life only for you, and I can't make you understand how I feel. But I hope someday you will. I didn't know what to say. I was tired. So tired of fighting. Tired of feeling so abandoned and lost. But I didn't want to give up on my mom. Not completely. I'm not asking you to give him a chance, she continued, but I am asking you to try to understand why this is happening. Why he is here. I don't want to, I whispered, almost ashamed of the words. I don't know how to, but I want to try. For you. My mom reached out and gently took my hand, her voice thick with emotion. That's all I can ask for, sweetheart. Just try. And if you're not ready, that's okay. We'll take it one day at a time. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. Maybe I wasn't ready to accept Jake, but I was willing to try for my mom, for our relationship. I couldn't let it fall apart because of my anger. I needed to grow. We both needed to grow. The next day at school, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Jenna. Hey, can I crash at your place tonight? I'm in desperate need of a break from my own family. I smiled and quickly typed a reply. Of course, I'll let you know when I get home. That night, Jenna arrived at my house with her overnight bag, and we both retreated to my room to talk. She could tell something had changed in me. So, how are things with your mom and Jake? She asked, sitting on the edge of my bed. I shrugged. We talked. I don't know if things will ever go back to normal, but I'm trying. Jenna raised an eyebrow. What's the hardest part about it for you? I thought for a moment, then answered. I think it's just the feeling of being replaced. Like my mom's moved on from me, and I don't have a place in her life anymore. Jenna nodded sympathetically. I get it. But remember, this doesn't mean she loves you any less. It just means she's starting a new chapter in her life. You don't have to be okay with it all at once, but you don't have to shut her out either. I looked at her, feeling a bit of clarity washing over me. You're right. I can't let this destroy my relationship with her. I can still be mad, but I don't have to push her away. Exactly, Jenna said with a grin. And if you need to vent or scream about it, you know where I live. I chuckled, grateful for her unwavering support. Thanks, Jen. I think I might need that. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I had good days and bad days. Some days I could talk to my mom without it feeling like a battle, while other days the frustration bubbled over, and I wanted to scream. But I was trying, and that counted for something. One evening after dinner, my mom sat me down again, this time in the living room. Jake wasn't there, which was a small relief. I know this hasn't been easy, Soph, my mom began, her voice gentle but firm. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. Always. And no matter how this plays out with Jake, you'll always come first in my heart. I promise. I looked at her, my eyes filled with tears. I'm trying, Mom. I'm trying so hard to understand. She smiled softly, pulling me into a hug. And that's all I can ask for. A month had passed since that conversation with my mom. Things had shifted, but not in the way I had hoped. We had our moments of peace, but every time Jake was around, it felt like the cracks were being dug deeper. The tension was suffocating, and I couldn't escape the feeling that no matter how hard I tried to accept it, this situation was destroying everything I knew. One Friday evening, everything came to a head. I had been avoiding home more often, hiding out at Jenna's or staying late at school. But that night, I came home to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. I knew it was Jake. I could tell by the way my mom was laughing back, like they were in their own little world. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest and turned to go upstairs. But then my mom's voice echoed through the hallway. Sophia, can we talk? I froze, my feet planted to the floor. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to do this anymore. But something in her tone made me stop, made me turn around. I walked into the kitchen, trying to keep my breathing steady, but I could feel the storm building inside of me. Jake was sitting at the table, casually flipping through his phone. My mom was standing next to him, her smile fading as she noticed my hesitation. "Sophia, we need to talk," my mom repeated. There was a heaviness in her voice now, something that sent a chill down my spine. "I don't want to talk about Jake," I said, trying to control my temper. "I don't want to talk about any of this." "Soph," my mom began, her voice softer, almost pleading. "I'm asking you to try, to understand. Jake and we've talked and we've both agreed that we want to be together. And I want you to be okay with that." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My whole world spun for a moment as the reality of what she was saying settled in. "You're choosing him, aren't you?" I whispered, barely able to keep my voice from breaking. "You're choosing him over me." Jake looked up from his phone, the edge of his smile looking too comfortable, too smug. "Soph, you've got to understand. This isn't about you. It's about your mom and me. We've got something good and I'm not going anywhere." I felt something snap inside me. The anger, the hurt, the overwhelming sense of betrayal. It all rushed up at once. "You really don't get it, do you, Jake?" I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. "You're not just some random guy. You were my boyfriend. You're my past, and now you're trying to be my mom's future. You think you can just waltz in and replace me like I don't matter?" Jake stood up, his face hardening. "I never wanted to hurt you, but you've been holding on to things that aren't there anymore. Your mom and I—" "Stop." I cut him off, my voice breaking. "Just stop." I turned to my mom, tears streaming down my face. "I'm not a kid anymore, Mom, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to lose you. And I feel like I'm losing you. To him." The room fell silent. My mom's eyes were wide, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out to me. "Soph, please don't think that. I love you more than anything. But I need you to understand that I have a right to find happiness too." Her voice cracked, and I saw her fight to keep herself composed. I shook my head violently, backing away from her. No, you don't get to do this to me. You don't get to throw me aside just because you want to feel seen." The words stung like acid in my mouth, but I couldn't stop them from coming. "I'm not okay with this. I'll never be okay with it." Jake stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You need to stop making this harder than it is. If you don't like it, that's your problem, not ours." That was the moment I cracked. The hurt, the anger, the sense of betrayal, it all boiled over. "You're right, Jake." I spat, my words full of venom. "It's my problem, but I'm done. I'm done trying to be okay with this. You two can have each other. I don't need either of you." With those words, I turned and ran out of the kitchen, up the stairs and into my room. I slammed the door behind me, locking it for good measure. I collapsed onto my bed, crying uncontrollably, feeling every ounce of the weight of the last few months pressing down on me. I had lost my mom. I had lost Jake. And in a way, I had lost myself too. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, my thoughts spinning out of control. I could hear them talking downstairs, my mom and Jake's voices low and strained. I wanted to block it out, pretend it wasn't happening, but I couldn't. By morning, nothing had changed. My mom knocked softly on my door, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. Eventually, I heard the door to her room open, then the sound of her footsteps fading as she left the house. I knew she wasn't coming back anytime soon. I had made my choice. I wasn't ready to forgive her. I wasn't ready to accept this version of my life. Maybe one day I would, but not today. Today, I was broken, and there was no fixing it. Not yet. Not ever.